My local track racer, Sean Frazier, he does the A block and the B block like this, as well as the stock setup by Jared Wiggins also does the A block and the B block like that. If you're doing this, do step C2 before you do step C1. This is my EB410 that I've raced for probably going on 3 years, and I think it's finally time to retire it. From the Netcruzer RC. So yeah, this Tekno buggy, I'll have to go back and look at the footage, but back at the GFX track, I built this as a replacement to a Schumacher Cat K1 Aero I was racing, I believe. And this was the first kind of new style generation of four-wheel drive buggy that I built, and wow, what a wonder this thing is. This is my first Tekno, and now this is my top choice of racing brand. If Tekno makes a car for that class, I usually want to get that car. A lot of the other brands make excellent stuff, and honestly I've been wondering if I should maybe try and get some of those other ones to try, but in the spring of this year I had already ordered the EB410.2 before any of these new late 2020 vehicles were ever announced. So we're going to build this, and this is going to be a very competitive new kit. It's basically just an updated version of the EB410. I've been racing my 410 against 410.2s for the last few months, and they are somewhat comparable because setup wise you can get them both to handle what seems like fairly close to each other, but there are additional tune-up options and stronger parts in the .2. So we're going to build it, and then I'll give you a comparison of my old and worn EB410 versus the new EB410.2. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to start a new kit build of a Tekno EB410.2. This is a 1/10 scale competition buggy. Here's a bunch of the new things that are on it. It has a 7075 aluminum long wear chassis. Now the chassis on my original 410 is starting to get quite a bit worn, but it's not bad. Larger 3.5 hinge pins, new hinge pin braces, stronger one-piece wing mount design, big bore shocks, ultra secure locking spring perch, new rear arms with front mounted shocks, that's on the rear, new adjustable roll center rear hubs, 15-degree low roll center spindle carriers. Now my 410, I did a roll center adjustment on that car that made the handling much better, so I believe that's the tweak that they made to the spindle carriers. New aluminum front camber plate with bulkhead brace, revised material 81.2 spur gear, front and rear sway bars are now included, large wheel bearings and 6mm stub axles, and newly optimized reverse bell crank steering systems. That's what's new. I'm just going to start building it. This was announced in late 2019. My original 410 has been so good on this last year. It just kept getting faster and faster, and I was getting better and more consistent driving it. I didn't want to switch and build a new car when I was having such a great final year with my EB410. So now my EB410 is actually kind of broken and worn. I had to replace the front shock tower. The front C-hub is broken. There's a couple little minor things that are wrong with it. I could keep this going, but there's really no point. It's really at the point now where it's old enough where it needs a lot of TLC, and might as well just build this new kit since I already have it, and I want to compare it anyway. This kit, I've had it for so long and I haven't even broken the seal yet. So here we go, breaking the seal on the EB410.2. Okay. Back of the Tekno kits, they give you a nice little chart of the tools that they recommend you get for building it. The outer sleeve of the EB410 is just the box art, and then you get these nice white boxes which have all the goodies inside. The body and the wing did not change on this kit, but a lot of the other stuff did. Officially started bag A, step 1. The machining and the materials are a little bit nicer. I know that they mentioned that this is made out of a different material. It looks like it. Looks like it might be a little bit stronger, also a little bit lighter weight. They've got some weight savings on the back side of the spur. These outdrives actually look a little bit different, like the machining is better on them. I think that'll be the general theme, is they'll be strengthening, lightening, and just better build quality of materials. So I'm going to carry on. I'm not going to show you every step along the way like I did on some other builds, but I'm just going to go through and try and build some of this. I'll call out some of the unique things that I find along the way. As I mentioned, just the machining on these parts seems significantly better than the EB410. The 410.2, just the quality of the plastic seems quite a bit better. Just starting some of the assembly here. Center diff cup. I'm having to go on memory here, but I think that these gears are thicker in the diffs. Just everything seems to be machined better, feel better. It's going to be a nice build. The new kit spec diff oils are 30,000 CST center, 15,000 CST front, and 10,000 CST rear. We will use kit spec oils. I think they're a little heavy. I've seen other EB410.2s on the track, and I do believe they ended up lightening the oils a bit, but we'll run them, see how they go, box stock. I'm noticing in the manual that they're showing this gear as having the a star X groove in it for the pin, and the actual gear itself does not. So yeah, this has changed because that's how it looked in the 410, and this is the 410.2. I've got my first 3 diffs built: center diff, front diff, rear diff. Good to go. I know I keep saying this, but all of the quality of the plastics and the metal seems significantly nicer than when I built my 410. The plastic moldings seem better. The metal seems better. I mean, it's kind of intangible, but it's there. I don't recall it being this nice when I built the 410. I'm very impressed with the build so far. I'm only just in bag C, but everything's going great. Got these extra notes about special areas. Just ran into my first issue, which is this here, these bell crank posts. They want you to use a 5.5 mil wrench to hold on to this post while screwing in this top. Before they have you do that step, they have you installing this ball stud with 4 washers, and those 4 washers get right in the way of where you're supposed to hold on to that nut, so there's not enough clearance. It looks like there would be, but there's not. I've tried it with a long skinny one. You can't get on there well enough to hold it, as well as with a little box wrench. You don't have enough clearance either. So I might, in order to tighten those, I might have to back these off and remove those. I would recommend doing it in opposite order. There's no reason why this has to go on first. If you're doing this, do step C2 before you do step C1. Also on step C4, pay special attention to doing that where it's aligning it, because it is on a bit of an angle, and I don't recall that on the 410 original. So the new bell cranks are on a bit of a laid back orientation, so you want to make sure that you pre-thread into that hole first, as well as when you're threading these posts in. It's very easy to go too tight. I've just put them in at the normal strength that I would put in a normal screw, and now they're binding up a lot, so I have to certainly back them off until you get a nice free-flowing bell crank system. It's these rears that are binding, and you just got to back them off a quarter of a turn, and you want this to basically be able to move around with gravity. So now after adjusting it, now they're nice and loose. This is the new revised front reverse bell crank system. So I think it's the angle of it has been revised, so now it's got a bit of a kick up, and the Ackerman's a little bit different. On step C5, remember to add grease to your diff ring. Put a little goop in there just so that it rotates around and gets it nice and covered. And then when you put the cover on, you just want to make sure that, again, that's something that's not binding, which is these 2 screws, and then back it off a quarter of a turn. Basically, you just want to rotate this assembly once it's all together to make sure it's not binding, and then you can put the bottom cover on. All greased up, nice and smooth. Bag D is the rear assembly, and nothing really tricky so far other than just pay attention to what orientation you put this piece on, because it is possible to put it on backwards. I did not notice at first, and this is the correct orientation, so you want to put that on. Alright, the front and the rear diff cases are done, along with the center differential, and we're on to bag E, which is getting the hinge pins into place, getting the rear arms into place, front sway bar into place, and here's some of the new parts. And man, I know I keep going on about this, but just the quality, guys, the quality. Check out some of these parts, like the materials, the machining. It's all very impressive. Here's the new arms. They are thick. Also flat bottomed. I never ever broke, I'm still on all the original plastics on my EB410 after 3 years. I never broke an arm on that car ever after many, many crashes. These ones are even stronger. As well as the hinge pins are 3.5 millimeters. So yeah, wow. The new inserts, they seem to be made out of a different style of material as well. Gray plastic. As well as the washers for the wheelbase shims. working my way through bag E right now, and I'm on step E3, which is putting the rear arms on and putting these inserts into the blocks. Now, one thing about putting these inserts in the block is you have to cut the inserts out of a tree, and so when you cut them out of the tree yourself, you might not do the best job of getting all the flashing off. If you don't, then when you're putting it into the block, you might notice that it sticks up a bit. So this one had a little bit too much flashing on it. You can still see a little remnant of it there where it was just sticking up enough where it wouldn't fully seat. And so I did then just scrape it down a little bit more, and then now I can get it. Be aware of little things like that. Those small little tolerances make a difference on a race car. As well as these little shims, they want you to put a thick one on the rear and then 2.5s on the front. So a 1 mil rear, 2.5s on the front. I'm not sure what the point of that is. Then it's equal spacing all around anyway, but I guess it just gives you some options in the future if you want to move wheelbase shorter or longer. Old EB410, I did have to ream the arms when I put it together. This one, it all seems extremely free, and I want to show you it before I hook up the sway bar. It's pretty good. I haven't put the front block on yet, so when I do, it'll tighten it up a bit, but I'm going to show you what it's like once I get the front block on, how loose it is. The new 0.2 rear assembly is together, except for the sway bars are not connected. The original 410, I had to ream the arms in order to get it to have droop or to be free-flowing under gravity. This one, there's no need. As you can see, it works. You would never have that much droop, so it doesn't matter that they get stuck down at the bottom. You just want to make sure that they fall under their own gravity. So no reaming necessary. That's an old trick that you don't need to do on some of these newer 2020, 2019 cars. This is using the new 3.5 mil hinge pins. This is using the box stock setup, which is the center dot, which gives you a 2-degree toe in the rear, and the new inserts and the new hinge pins through the new arms. Everything has like the ideal amount of resistance and play. Very happy. And man, does this thing look strong. Holy cow. And bag F is building the rear axles and the new rear hub carrier assembly. This is all new. This is the variable height, variable adjustment hubs. They're quite complex in ability to change your geometry, which I'm going to have to learn about what the changes make on the track. And then you start building links. Instead of building the box stock links, I'm going to pull off some upgrade parts off of my old car, because my old car has Lunsford titanium links. All the links are titanium, which I've upgraded front and rear. Just going to pull these off, clean them up, and move them over, as well as I'm trying to decide if I want to run the shock tower as well as some of my Exotech parts. Here's an upgraded Exotech front diff plate assembly. They have revised this one. There was one significant setup change on this car which just transformed the whole car for me, and it was a tip I saw on the forums. This is on the old EB410. I used to have a problem where I didn't feel like I had enough steering on power. There was one trick on the forums that I saw when this car first came out. I put in a large 3 or 4 millimeter shim washer on the outside of this turnbuckle link, and that made a huge difference in what I believe is lowering the roll center. So that made the car handle way better for me, and I do believe that the new geometry on the new 0.2 already has new low front roll center, so we'll see how that translates over too. I shouldn't need to put those shims in the new car. So these are the new VHA rear hubs, variable height adjust. That allows you to change your rear suspension geometry by the type of insert that you put in the top and the bottom. I've made my links, but unfortunately I could not reuse my titanium. Now, I looked on Lunsford's website and I checked the sizes ahead of time. Their new EB410.2 has the same length, 55 millimeter link, but they must have changed it because this one doesn't have enough threads. In order to use it with the new style geometry, you need to be able to move these in and out a lot more, and the actual 22.5 millimeter size is way shallower than it used to be. They probably revised this part where they've added more threads to it but kept it the same length. Anyway, that's what makes these rear ones not usable. I'm likely going to be able to use the fronts, but we'll see. If I can put the titanium on, I will, but can't use the rear ones. Or I'm deviating from kit setup. So this one, they want you to run a high roll center on the rear. I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to change this up top where they've got what I would consider to be lowest camber gain. They've got your link at the furthest possible point. Let me show you what I mean here. So instead of shimming it up and down, you've got these inserts. And the insert, you can put it in either way. So I've got it where I've got all of the holes furthest down I can, which actually raises this up, which gives you higher roll center. And I'm going to be using the furthest inside hole. So that's going to be high camber gain for my track. So that's how I'm going to do it. And that's different from the kit setup. I'm working on building the rear axle, and the rear axles are 71 millimeters in length. But this hub assembly, seems like all the holes are in the exact same position, so they don't shift the length of the axle. I guess they just do that for weight savings. I'm not sure. I have completed bag F. So this is the rear assembly all complete, and what a nice piece this is. A bunch of changes over the original. New one-piece wing mount, a lot less tweaked when you land on your wing. That's going to be nice. The new shock standoffs, which I'll explain when we get to the point of actually hanging on the shocks. They include a bushing on the shaft. Here's the new variable height adjustable hubs, rear hubs. I have it on the highest roll center rear position. Now the outer rear pins are still not fully captured, but they're captured better than the old ones, so I don't think they're going to pop out because the arms are so much stronger and thicker. But there's one little locking screw there which just holds that 3.5 mil pin in place, and that's how the new hub assembly ties into the arm. The rear hub, because I'm going to run the high camber gain for my track, which is putting this ball stud on the inner position, and out of the box they want you on the furthest out position. They have these completely flipped around with the ball on the furthest outside. I'm running it on the furthest inside, which is going to give higher camber gain. The size that they told me to make these links is incorrect for that geometry. So as you can see here, my rear hub is pointing down. So I'm going to have to shorten these. So I'll just use a turnbuckle wrench to shorten those in when it's all built. But yeah, that geometry is wrong if you're going to change those positions. Anyway, really nice. Very impressed with this kit so far. I really like how they've done it. So the shock tower is the same as the original car, but they've flipped it so that the shocks are now going to be on the front versus before they hang around on the rear. And then because they did that, they're also running the front. They're also running the sway bar backwards. It's just really interesting how they were able to reuse some parts, but then design all the other completely new ones. I really like this thing. I like it a lot, and everything just. The fit and finish of everything, I know I keep saying that, but the fit and finish has been fantastic. Very, very, very good. Okay, now onto the front end assembly, bag G, and I just got all the parts laid out. I don't have a whole lot to talk about this other than, again, fit and finish. These are the new hinge pin blocks where it keys into the chassis. Just a beautiful piece. And here's the new front arms. Before I get too far along here on step G3, which is where we're at, I just wanted to mention another deviation I'm doing from stock setup. So stock setup, they want you to put a dot down in the B block and dot down in the A block. I'm going against that, so I'm using a double dot down in the A block and one dot up in the B block. And that's according to setup sheets that I've been looking up. My local track racer, Sean Fraser, he does the A block and the B block like this, as well as the stock setup by Jared Wiggins also does the A block and the B block like that. So check your setup sheets against the type of tracks that you think you're going to be racing on, because this is my track and I'm replicating a lot of this setup, although I am going to try the kit stock bump steer Ackerman steering stuff. But I'm set up my rear end and my front end the same as Sean Fraser. Also, regarding arm reaming, I mentioned that you don't have to ream the arms. Now, if this was an old style setup, you actually would, because these hinge pins go in here very tight. You don't have to ream the arms front or rear, as well as even if this is a little bit stiff, because they're using this new style material in the hinge pin blocks, they pivot within the blocks. That's the whole point. And how you change your geometry is the shifting of this, and it just rotates within that anyway. So that's how that works. The front end is a little prone to binding up, so it is possible to build it and then have it where it'll just stay in its position. That's bad. You don't want that. So that means everything's too tight. But I figured out where you can loosen it to make it free up. So it's actually not in the blocks themselves or the shims, and you do want to have it on short wheelbase of the box setup. It wants you to put 2 mils on the front. This is the front of the car, so the arms are set back. Anyway, the reason why the arms get stuck up is because this whole assembly is clamping a little bit too tight. So you just have to back that off just like a quarter or an eighth of a turn. And then that's all it takes to free them up. It's that minute of a difference. So just be aware of how tight you're putting in those screws, as well as even something like the sway bars. I put the sway bar one in too tight, and then it would fall, but fall really slow. And I think that was why as well. So I just loosened those off all a little bit, and now it's within acceptable limits for me. So we're good. Now working on bag H, front axle and hub assemblies. And one thing to note is that if you've never built a kit before, I just realized that the Tekno instructions may not be the most easy ones to understand for you, because they don't even mention that you have to do this ×2, right? You have to build 2 of these and 2 of these, and then the orientation. So you got to kind of know what you're doing related to that. They only give you one picture here of this front hub. I remember talking about this on the original 410 because it is possible to build it wrong. So just pay close attention to the way the plastics are molded. This is the proper way to build it, so that you put your bump stop for steering on the side that has the little notch that sticks out. It is possible to build it the wrong way, although you would notice it that it's binding. It would hit. It doesn't have full articulation if you put it on the wrong side. But anyway, that's the proper way to build it. I do like that the kingpins don't have any washers in between the C-hub and the bearing carrier. I like that a lot, because in all my on-road cars you have to sandwich a little washer in between, and it's always a hard thing to do, and this doesn't have it. It is a specialized kingpin though, where in between the threads then there's a locking grub screw which then holds it into place. It's a little bit overkill, but it's good. On my 410 I remember it being like that, and it never had a problem. So you lock it in with grub screws on either side. They're not installed yet. That locks the hinge pin in place, so the hinge pin can't come out, which is a great thing, because yeah, on a lot of on-road cars the hinge pins come out. Anyway, really like that design. Tekno, they make some really good engineering decisions. Also, for these kingpins, I think it's the first time that you need the 2.5 millimeter to install it. All the other screws so far have been 1.5 or 2 mil. This is the 2.5 to put the kingpins in. Now, they don't mention it in the book, but I do think it's important in how tight you put these kingpins in. So you don't want to crank it down too far, because then it will bind up the whole assembly. I mean, your steering servo is going to overpower that anyway. It's not going to matter, but to me that's still a little too tight. So I'm going to back them out a bit before I lock them in. Well, I dialed this one in where I liked how loose it was. It still holds its position. These are not so loose that they're floppy under gravity. You can't get them that way. It's just part of the design. It's meant to be kind of tight. Now the front links are the exact same size and geometry as the original 410, so I am going to be able to reuse my Lunsford titanium links for the steering links and the front camber links. So I've just taken them off my old car, and I'll be able to put them directly on my new car. The titanium links are a little bit stronger than the stock steel ones, so I will put the titanium on the front, and I will be looking to put the titanium on the rear as well, but like I mentioned, I can't use these ones on the rear because there's not enough thread, so I might just buy those 2 new parts. It's not necessary. I do think that the new car is going to be stronger because the link is significantly shorter on the rear, so it probably won't break, but I like having titanium links on my race cars. Just finished up bag I, which is the front end and front shock tower assembly, and we are built and ready to go. So I transferred over my titanium links from the old car. I've also made a slight setup change, which is to move the shock purchase to the furthest inside based on the setup sheet that I'm building it off of, which is the Sean Fraser setup sheet. We're good to go there. Now it's time to actually put the front and the rear end onto the chassis. So here's the new chassis. This is the new long wear, improved strength chassis. And you can see here it's got the hinge pin braces molded right into the chassis, so that's pretty cool. And the kick up is slightly revised as well for longer wear. Very nice chassis, 7075 aluminum. I'm working on securing the front end to the chassis, and you have to loosen off the A block a bit, and then this is the part that keys into the chassis. So I've just completed that part. It's not fully seated, but it's tight, so I don't want to take it off again, but I'm just going to tighten it down. But that's pretty neat how it all locks into place. Super secure. Just be careful when you're doing this step. Keep in mind that the very fronts are 8 mils, the 1322s are 8 mils, and the 1323s are 10 mils. So you get a whole whack load of 10 mils. We've got 3 8 mils there, so I'll use 2 of the 8 mils and 2 of the 10 mils we're putting that front end on. The front end is on the chassis, the center brace is in, the motor mount plate is in, and I was going to work on the rear diff mount, but that's an upgrade part also that I put on my old car. This very nice Exotech aluminum piece, which I wanted to move over. I was just checking compatibility. It is compatible. Even though they have changed the plastic mount to now have 4 mounts on the top, likely they revised this optional carbon brace, which I'm also going to use. This is the stock upper brace, which I do not like. And I always recommend that you put on the center carbon brace on all EB410s. It strengthens the chassis significantly. It also saves your center diff gears, because the less flex that's holding this in means that that part isn't shifting around, and it saves this gear. So I only went through maybe 1 spur gear. This is the center differential out of the old car, and I've only ever had to put maybe 1 or 2 spur gears on in 3 years, so I'm pretty happy about that. Anyway, the center diff mounts are exactly the same between old and new, so this part is compatible. Another interesting thing is the rear chassis brace. You now only get 1 long rear chassis brace, and on the old car, you got the long and the short. The upgraded center brace is on, and I'm installing the rear end. Now the rear end keys the blocks into the chassis too, which is a new design thing, but you don't have to loosen them off. I need 2 hands. Hold the drive shaft in, slide it forward, put in your screws, and yeah, it's starting to look like a car.